Good evening again, President James, Interim Superintendent McCarn, and Governing Board. I know the hour is getting late and we still have more agenda items, so I will be swift and then return the time back to President Jean so you can have your discussion and move your agenda forward. So this update, I'm going to jump right into the main changes. All of those slides you've seen before. Okay, so again, we introduced this comparison document, which again, the main purpose of reflecting it this way was to not take you too far away from where you had been, but to begin to show the corner turn on this is the original plan, and these are the updates. So all of the items that you approved before, so this line, these particular items, reclass restricted funding, these activities are happening and being implemented so that at second interim, as is noted, you'll see and we'll be able to reflect those items. Same thing on this tab with the Chromebook purchase, the arts and music grant. So all of those items are being actualized now. We did balance. This is that last green line, the supplemental concentration. So again, that meant that if we were over spending, we needed to make adjustments in that budget by the 4.3 million. That entry has been made and is completed. The next main item, we haven't done the self-insurance yet, but we're working through that piece and the implementation of that. It's a little chunkier to implement. But one of the main ones that we wanted to update you on is this area in blue. So there was an ask on the 26-27. So we have the 25-26 and the 26-27 activity. So we've shared with you that budget development was in progress, which is impacting 26-27. So this is one item based on this moment in time and kind of this cutoff period, right, for this report that the district has just on the 270. So I think the approach was, let's address the 270, and then budget development was going to yield what it's going to yield, which as you have just approved last week, you approved more than what's reflected here in reductions to administrators. But as it relates to the cabinet and leadership's focus on this particular item solo, the reductions, have yielded 60 less positions. You see the split. And so this is the other part about when we're sharing information with you about we want to make a reduction, but where is it impacting? So again, those positions based on the way they're funded are restricted and unrestricted very specifically. I think the part of the call out to was I'm now using air quotes, CERNA positions, if you will, if that was part of the framing. I think there are some questions / concerns about, where we started, and we talked about that, how we got to the 270 from the 2019-20 year, and then what increases have happened as far as staffing. We'll talk a lot more about that definitely too at second interim, but these reductions plus the ones that will come back with a reconciliation of all the administrators and how they're funded will come forth, but definitely wanted to grab this moment to be able to share this piece on that progress and which areas it will impact. And if I can spell restricted twice in one sentence, that would be great. This slide, again, just summarizes that. So the administrator FTE was 383.9 as of October 2025 when this process started. For the cabinet in 1920, there was 265, and as Member Kayada stated, there was a round up to 270. The general fund, as of October 25th, had 328.5 FTE. So that 383 was all funds. 328.5 was the general fund, and so that reduction of 58.5 was the target. We've reduced more than that to 60, and then with that, those are the proposed reductions is 60.1. And so as a result of that, again, there are still more administrative positions that were reduced as part of the how do I balance my budget based on the 20% and and either funding changing and our allocations changing. And so that still yielded additional administrative reductions, but those are considered separate as they're part of the 20% and balancing and trying to fit this budget within a lower allocation next year. Okay, so those are the main highlights. All of the other areas, as we're talking about, we're still working to implement. Adult education is an area, again, for 26, 27, that we are looking at as far as not making a contribution based on where we currently are seeing, but that was listed as one of the strategies. So all of these items we're still reviewing for the fiscal solvency plan, plus again, still recommending additional strategies. We showed you this chart this year, and because we started with the unrestricted general fund amount for the administrative reduction, I'm only showing you the 4.9 in this dot because that's the unrestricted general fund impact, though you saw that there is a $5.3 million reduction in restricted resources that's happening as a result of the administrative reductions. Okay, so with that being said, I will yield the floor back to President Jean for next steps. And then we also talked about March 5th. There'll be an update as we're in this continual process of updates, and then we'll be back with the second interim on March 19th.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment?
We do. 2 speakers, Jennifer Kretschmann with 2 cards for 4 minutes, followed by Trevor Tenaguchi.
Thank you. Good evening, Board President Jean. I apologize, there was some confusion about the speaking and when she would speak. Anyways, good evening, Board President Jean, Interim Superintendent McGarn, and members of the board. My name is Jennifer Kretschmann, and I am here as both the Director of Student Attendance and Engagement and as a parent in the district, a long-time parent in the district. I have a 32-year-old who graduated, and I also have a 1-year-old baby that I just got guardianship of and I'm caring for at home, who I imagine will also be part of the school district. I want to thank the CBO for tonight's fiscal solvency plan presentation, and I want to be clear that I do understand the gravity of the moment and the obligation to stabilize our budget. But fiscal responsibility is not simply about cutting line items. It's about protecting the few investments that actively reduce long-term costs and restore revenue. And that's exactly what the Office of Student Attendance and Engagement, or the CARE team as you know it, does. Attendance is not just a student service metric, it is the core driver of district revenue. When students are present, SCUSD is funded. When the students are absent, we lose both instructional time and ADA. The CARE team is one of the only district functions that directly protects and recovers revenue by re-engaging students and strengthening attendance systems, school-to-home outreach, and documentation practices that protect the district in audits. I'm now going to switch over. I've provided for you much of our district data. We have consistently had positive gains in attendance over the past 4 or 5 years since the pandemic, and we have increased both ADA and reduced chronic absence. District-wide, we've reduced chronic absence by 13.2%, and that measures right along with the state, if not better. And then as far as our student groups, our most vulnerable, including homeless, African American, American Indian, and Pacific Islanders have all seen incredible gains, and those are core groups that we have targeted and provided interventions for over the past 3 years. I'm now going to read Lucy's portion because she spent a lot of time putting it together. Dear board members, my name is Lucy Lewis. I'm a child welfare and attendance liaison in the attendance department. I would like to begin by sharing that since 2018, our department has been entirely grant funded. Throughout that time, we have been responsible stewards of those funds, ensuring that every dollar allocated to us has been used directly to support our mission of reducing absenteeism and increasing student attendance. We have consistently and effectively utilized all of our awarded funds and have never had to return money to the state. And that is not entirely. So last year, I was CC'd on an email. The state had billed for $30,000 stating that we had not spent that money. I had to stop that and intervene because we absolutely had. Our whole entire team is very thorough in everything that we do, including we're really good at spending money when it results in supporting our students. I want to take a moment to also share how vital the attendance and engagement department is to the success of our district. Our work directly impacts students, families, and schools by addressing the barriers that prevent consistent attendance. We often are the bridge between home and school. We keep a log of the daily phone calls we take, and it's sometimes up to 50 calls a day for various departments, and we answer the phone all day. There's a lot more, but you'll see it in your packets. We appreciate everything that you're doing, and we will be here consistently. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, board. My name is Trevor Taniguchi. I'm the parent of a kindergartner, and I know at LDV's Children's Center, and I know you've already heard from a lot of parents about our concern with the proposed elimination of that program. So I echo everything that the parents before me have said, and I really want to implore this board to apply some common sense. I mean, common sense tells us that when you have an over-enrolled program and a separate site that's under-enrolled, you shouldn't view that as a single entity. Common sense tells us that when you increase fees 25% in a year, and that program is still over-enrolled, you have a viable community draw to that school, to that program. It's a meaningful program that provides necessary resources, and it is a draw. Students, parents, including myself, pick that school because it has that program available. And so common sense also tells us that you shouldn't just stick to your budget principles because they were at the beginning of this process. You should evaluate them as you progress, and I acknowledge there's huge cuts that need to be made. But you should be open to evaluating and looking at where you started and new information that comes to light. And so common sense tells us that you can't cut a program that could be self-sustaining. And when I watched the comments from the last meeting, it didn't seem to me that staff was actually evaluating whether or not the LDV program was self-sustaining. I've asked for that information. The school district has told me it's going to take over 2 months to provide that information to me. So to me, that tells me we need to evaluate this program. There's comments, there's financial data. It seems to me that this is a self-sustaining program. And if it's not, if it's close, you've heard tons of parents come and speak to you that were willing to figure out ways in which it can be self-sustaining. So I really implore you to take a deeper look. Don't just accept what you've started with as a budget principle. Really evaluate the true impact because it is a draw to this community, to the school district, and has a true impact on families. Thanks.
Thank you. Board discussion. All right, I'll start with a couple of questions for you. I'm noticing that there's a huge emphasis, or it feels like there's an emphasis on two key parts of our fiscal solvency plan. And the first one is this, that in budget development, everyone was asked to cut 20% across the board. Is that 20% across the board cut of budgets generating the number we need so that our second interim will be qualified in March?
So mathematically, if I looked at your multi-year projection, that would have, from adopted budget and even from your second interim. So the amount that you would determine, like, how much do you need to reduce? So you look at that deficit for that out year, which is 26, 27, and then you'd factor in what total is that of our total budget. So I'm anticipating that's where the 20% came from. It does not appear that it is going to be enough. And so with that, we began, right, this process in the winter, late fall. And so that's what we're evaluating. So where we are now is, now that the budget development process has stopped moving, if you will, now we're pulling all that information together, which so that we can see net, where did we land? And that's like that update we'll bring on the 5th. So why also do we want that information? Because by the time I do second interim, those numbers, in addition to whatever we have on the fiscal solvency plan, should go into the multi-year projection for that 26, 27 year. So then we can see, okay, we got these strategies plus what we actually did in budget development. You put that in the multi-year projection. Now this is what the balance looks like and will yield. So those are the, like, in big chunky process steps, what's happening now, and what we are looking at, what we may need to continue to do based on that number already being applied.
One of the concerns I have is that the 20% does feel more randomly picked rather than, very strategically done. I've heard stories that it's been inequitably applied in various places. I've heard concerns that it didn't take into consideration how departments worked or how school sites worked, and funding sources weren't necessarily a part of it either. And so it feels like the 20% across the board, and it's, the guesstimate is 34 million. We don't have a number yet because that's what you're working on. But if we look at the number of how much we thought we'd save with 270 admin was at 14, 15 million, and we're at 4 million with an additional 5 million in restricted. I don't know if that number is going to be enough, and that gravely concerns me.
Right.
My second question is, we spent a lot of time talking about reducing admin to 270. Is that generating the number we need to have a qualified second interim?
So no, it's going in the right direction, but not by itself. So the 14 million that you saw, that was on the original amount, that amount would be total, despite the resource. And then what we've had the opportunity to have that clarity on is, our main focus is the unrestricted general fund. Yes, we have some restricted resources that, are getting tight, as it relates to that, and we're reconciling those items too, but your deficit is primarily in the unrestricted general fund, and that's where our, pivotal area of focus is. So we want to see all of those adjustments change, and some of those can change as you free up money in restricted resources, and we see, oh, this area is a priority. Can we apply this particular non-labor labor to this now restricted resource now that we've freed up these resources? And that's what we've been talking about. We have to get to prioritization, right, and really focus about what we're prioritizing. And so we know that, we hear departments like the enrollment department, grant funded, we budget and we based on what we know is known and measurable. So that means we know that the money is, we've been granted the resource. And then measurable means when what is applying our knowledge that we're going to receive that resource. So we applied for something, great. It's known that we've applied for it. Measurable is when we get the award letter and you'll receive that money on next date. So there are a lot of grants and resources that we have annually that we do either notice or make sure that we don't include those items in the budget until we have confirmation that the money is coming. Because if we don't, the unrestricted general fund is picking that up. As it relates to the inequity component, A percentage definitely can create that inequity because every department, every site is not built the same. So for some areas, they don't have a lot of their budgets, departments that don't have much of non-labor costs, whether they're restricted resources or unrestricted. It's just people. And each year, right, as salaries are changing and compensation changes, we're funding those areas because we've prioritized them. And so therefore, they don't have 20% of books and supplies or other materials to reduce. So therefore, what they're left with is I have to reduce a person. So that's that strategy with that application that it doesn't provide. We didn't say 20% of non-labor. We said 20%. And then each department needed to figure out what that 20% is. So that will yield additional staffing reductions that you now have seen in those reductions. And then for some sites and or departments, that is non-labor. I can achieve that by doing, this reduction with other non-labor. So we're not going to have this particular project or activity, or we're not going to purchase these particular items. So if that's the root of that, that would be absolutely true. The intentionality of what the outcome was seeking to be was you figure out what 20% is, and that's what each department needed to do, understanding they are not all budgeted and funded the same.
So if we consider that there are essentially two main metrics or levers that the board is being asked to consider, one is our fiscal solvency plan, and the second one is layoffs. Have we identified all the cuts we need between those two things to ensure that our second interim will be qualified?
Have we identified all of the things? The answer would be no. We haven't identified all of the things. We are in the direction of doing so, but we have not identified all of the things, because you hear us still saying we still need to find strategies for 25, 26, and we need to find ongoing strategies, right, to be sustainable. Those, again, are the things that will get to those tougher conversations, again, about prioritization and, again, how you do school, and then what you're investing in based on that prioritization and those strategies, and where you want to see impact by program, by school, based on, their areas of focus. But we can't do everything everywhere. And so it is going to require us to really make some strong recommendations about how, we move forward. And we haven't gotten to that part. In addition to, it's not currently in the plan. So we're also working to bring those recommendations forward so that we can have those conversations, recognizing that we are in a time of the essence issue. So a lot of these conversations, unfortunately, will really get smashed into 26, 27. That may mean some recommendations from the superintendent about what summer and early board meetings look like. So we can continue this process, because you have to get there to achieve the goals that you're seeking to achieve, not just in solvency, but really in sustainability.
Danielle, can you go ahead and put that calendar up on the board for us? This last week, as board president, I've had many, many, many conversations with our fiscal advisor, with our interim superintendent, with legal, with our CBO, and with various members of the board. And I put together, maybe it's my teacher brain that needed a, where do we need to be by when, and let's backtrack. So what you have in front of you is a list of all of the board meetings from now until June. And one of the directions I've given, and this is as board president, but I definitely want to confirm that the board is okay with this as well. One of the concerns that we've been hearing is how much important conversation or big decisions are happening in non-regular meetings. And so these are our regular meetings, meaning all decisions that are important when it comes to the budget and layoffs will happen in a regularly scheduled meeting. So that's what's in front of you. There's also 2 points of this. Our budget must be approved by June 30th. Our final regular meeting will be June 18th. So that's when 2026-27 budget needs to be approved. On the 4th, it will be presented. This is our normal timeline. So if we start backtracking, the second interim is a required presentation. It happens in March, and it generally would happen on the 19th. The challenge is layoff notices have to go out by March 15th. Because we are in a negative certification in our budget, that means we have to have a third interim. That would happen in May. And to help everyone kind of understand where my brain's coming from, the second interim will include the actual spending through January 31st, so 7 months of our school year, and 5 months of predictions of how much we're spending this school year. For the third interim, it's actual spending through April 30th and predictions for the last 2 months. And asking for that to be presented not even a week later is crunch time, but the reason I've put it there is because the final notices for staffing have to be finalized by May 15th. So with this very crunch timeline in mind, I want to share the thoughts on my heart. And I'll start with, I really want to say this with as much kindness and empathy as I can, but there's this phrase, don't mistake my kindness for weakness, because this is the problem in front of us. Starting with our students, I am truly sorry for how the decisions we have to make up here are going to impact your learning experiences. Because as much as we want to keep the cuts away from your classrooms and your social supports, I don't yet believe we've been given everything we need as a board to ensure we can do that. The cuts we have to consider on this timeline will be painful. Staff, your livelihood, your expertise, your passion, and your commitment deserve better than the conversations we have to have now. District leadership, the way we've done it is not working. The systems we have in place are not helping us make the decisions we need to make. This feeling that somehow all of us are in a space of protecting ourselves or what's important to us, and there's an us against them or an othering that keeps happening in all spaces, it's not healthy and it's not productive. And I don't believe any of us want that. And I fully understand why we're there when it's this scary. But we have to address these long-standing problems in our budget in a new, different way. And this is the timeline we have in front of us. If I process how we got here, in June, we passed a budget for 25-26, knowing we were going to have to cut. That was actually already in the budget. I think at the time it was around 20 million, which felt like we can figure that out. But then in September, unaudited actuals came out and demonstrated that we had half the cash we thought we would have. So staff brought us our fiscal solvency plan in November, and the board approved it in the idea that this had had the conversations, it had gone through what it needed, and the board said yes. And in that report, at that time, the numbers were 70.3 million for this year and 59.7 million for next year. So in essence, 70 and 60 million between the 2 years. In December, we did not get an update on the fiscal solvency plan because the thought was we're getting a FCMAT report and we're doing our first interim. Unfortunately, that also meant we lost a month where it doesn't feel like much actually happened in the plan. Then we get to January, we have a new leader who's brought in, who's now been working 6 weeks to get caught up on everything. And as that information's happening, we're finding out conflicting stories from what we had been told in November to what we're being told now. And in that time, the board kept calling for more special meetings because we wanted information, we needed answers. We wanted to make decisions, the hard decisions, and that wasn't given to us. And so we made hard decisions on ourselves as a board that a week later we did pull back some of it because that's not the best way to lead either, but we felt like we needed to take action. What do you do in that moment? It's now February 19th. And there are no new recommendations in the fiscal solvency plan for us to approve tonight. The layoffs that have been brought to us were put together through the budget development plan, which in my questions have just demonstrated that 20% isn't equitably applied. It's not a scalpel. It's not asking about programs impact. It's not considering restricted and unrestricted and what that means. We don't have the info we need to do this. My recommended direction is that on March 5th, we get presented the informational update of the second interim of what needs to happen to be qualified. Qualified means we can pay and it would be self-identified as qualified because it's the county that would technically determine that. And self-identified means we are confident we can pay our bills for 25, 26, and 26, 27, but we might not be able to pay our bills in 27, 28. Because right now, that conversation can happen later. Which means if we're going to make a decision on a regular board meeting before March 15th, that on March 5th, we need either updates to the fiscal solvency plan that take care of ensuring we're at interim, or we need layoffs that ensure we're taking care that we will be qualified at second interim. Those are the two pieces of info that we are currently using to make that happen. The reality is we are here not because of any one person or this board or any particular leader. We're here because of a lot of systems and a lot of decisions and a lot of things that have led us here. But the reality is it is on all of us here to address it. Us 7 board members have been here since 2020, 2022, and 2024. But we're Team Sac City, and we're here to do the hard decisions now before an outsider comes in and does it to us. So I have a huge question for our interim superintendent, which she did know was coming. What is your plan to bring the board the staff recommended cuts that will ensure we have a qualified second interim in essentially one board meeting?
Thank you, Board President. That is a lot. And while as a system, we know that our processes, and specifically speaking to the budget development process as one that was used to help get us where we were, or where we are, continues to need fine-tuning. So here's what I'll say as first draft right now, knowing that through the work with Cabinet and others, because we're going to need lots of different perspectives on this, here are some thoughts. In order to have a qualified budget, self-identified, with a second interim that comes in March, you identify 2 places, the fiscal solvency plan and layoffs. With the fiscal solvency plan, we already are in process of updating it to include additional information, specific costing, and we anticipate having that for you, for the board, in March. We also have been working on contracts that can be stopped, canceled now, or that can be not renewed in the future. And that will generate savings, some now, some for next year. We have a reconciliation that was mentioned coming forward as well that will identify, because we did hear loud and clear, having layoffs and positions closing is part of the picture, not the full picture. So the reconciliation that is being worked on will show what has been closed, what has been opened, the costs associated with that. So the board will be able to see a clearer picture of the impact related to the financial component. But we're also looking at adding a line that talks about the impact, because we are losing a lot of positions and that has an impact on the system. So being able to identify what that is. The other things that we will do, I will say this week, we met with 3 of our labor partners. We're meeting with the other 2 tomorrow to have initial conversations. Well, some are initial and some are not, but around the budget, to give an opportunity to ask questions And it's clear to us in those conversations that we need to have another round. So we will be doing more of that. We also will, and I appreciate Cabinet in leaning in, we are going to have some forums, some opportunities for employees at CERNA as well as elsewhere to come in, and this is a lot. Try to digest, understand, process, and give other ideas for. Some of those will be during the lunch hour, some will be after work, just to ensure that we can get additional perspectives. In November or December, there was an email generated or an email identified, created, in which employees can share ideas that they had to cut costs. And that list has been looked at initially, but needs to be looked at again, and we're going to include and encourage employees to reach out and share ideas. Some of them that have come in so far are in terms of increasing fees like fingerprinting or NCLB testing fees, changing the hours, shortening calendars, a variety of things. Some of those negotiable, some of those not. But we will be leaning into that to generate ideas, additional ideas that have not yet been thought of. The things that, before I get to the last part, the things that we know we need to continue doing, that net list, that's what we're going to call it, of the reconciliation is certainly part of that. Input, I spoke about that even more from not just employees or labor partners, but perhaps some of the board committees that are in existence. And we hear loud and clearly that we need to display our progress in a way that is available and understandable. We will work towards that end as well. And we also, I think, are going to try to identify for 25, 26 and the cash flow concern, what that really means, what that looks like, what has happened for it. And then secondly, the structural deficit of 26, 27 and beyond, which the layoffs impact that component. Having heard that 20% was not enough and 270 was not enough, and that we need more layoffs, we are going to have to look and talk and work through that so that we can bring forward options, because I hear the board clearly asking for that as well, as opposed to one, take it or leave it. We are going to work towards that end in all of those areas in 2 weeks, which is March 5th, which is not a lot of time. And I do also have to just say that that's also not a lot of time to effectuate layoffs, knowing that there are so many components and pieces involved in conducting an analysis and ensuring that appropriate staff based on positions receive appropriate notices. So that's a lot. But those are things we are going to try and do and accomplish. And I guess what I'll say too is we recognize that there was frustration around the lack of what felt like the lack of urgency in talking about this since November or September. We can hear that. We can feel that. And we want to try to, not just for you all, although you all are the board, but for like our employees, all of our employees. We heard from employees tonight who presented who potentially are now going to be affected by more layoffs because we have we have to look in a variety of places, and it is only fair that we look in multiple places and not just at one unit or one non-unit. And I think all of that has to be part of the conversation. So I feel like I'm rambling at this point, but those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Since I asked that about 6 hours ago, thank you. Oh, speaking of which, I think we need to have a motion about extending our meeting. We're at 10:37. I'm going to ask that we extend it to 11:59, because if we have to start back up at midnight, we could. So do I have a motion to extend it to 11:59 with the hope that we're not going that late?
I will
Reluctantly?
reluctantly motion that.
Do I have a second? I'll second. Thank you. All in favor? Aye, I appreciate that. The next thing I really want to emphasize is the difference between preliminary notices and final notices in what we're asking for here. Because there is so much data that we don't seem to have that we need, and because I don't want to be in 26, 27 feeling like we do now, where we're cutting so problematically, and because 90+% of our unrestricted monies are in staffing, I just have a feeling that the layoffs are going to be painful. I'm thinking about it in my head like when you know you need to lose pounds, and if you've got months to do it, you can cheat a little bit here and fudge a little bit there. But we're at the point where we got 2 weeks to do this now. And that's why I started with the I'm really sorry. But I want to lean hard on this staff conducts initial budget and staffing analysis. I want to lean hard that as we go through the full second interim and we go into our third, that as we keep getting these updates, and as we do the plan you've outlined, that you're going to be getting multiple perspectives, talking to labor partners, talking to employee groups. It sounds like from what we've heard, a lot of people have a lot of ideas. So how do we create the space for those conversations and getting more and more data so that we can pull back as many of those layoff notices before final notices are confirmed as we possibly can? Because I also fully recognize the uncertainty that this brings and what that does in a teacher's mind, what that does in an educator's mind. So we have 2 weeks to make sure that the decisions brought to the board for the fiscal solvency plan and layoffs get us interim qualified. And then we've got essentially 2 months to pull those back and ensure that we're not using the big hammer we talk about, but we're approaching it from a scalpel place and restoring as much as possible as we can. With all of that, I don't see anybody in the speaking queue, but I am going to throw it back to my fellow colleagues on the board. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions to add to what we've just discussed? Member Ibarra.
In addition to this, I just want to and I know I spoke on this in some of the other presentations, but it's really important for me to see what the cost savings are from vacancies and from the directives that we're giving moving forward, because that's the only way we're going to be able to know if what we're, do we need to change directions in an upcoming meeting. And it's really hard, for me to go home and reflect on this and come prepared when I don't have that information. So I think that would be really helpful moving forward if we really strongly reflect that in our budget updates.
Thank you. Member Singh.
All right. Well, I'm going to start by thanking you, Member Jean, President Jean, for trying to bring this up thoughtfully. And part of that is recognizing that the inequities that we all see on how these cuts have been kind of prescribed, let's say, and which has forced staff members to come out here and advocate for themselves, and that's not what we want to see. Because that feels directed, right? When you feel like your department or a group of folks are being attacked at the same time in a whole different realm, this is so frustrating that our backs are against the wall, and I'm gonna call it out, we've been asking, and I appreciate how you put it, Member Jean, but the truth is we wouldn't be in this situation if we had been doing what we've been saying to do for months at this point. We are in this situation also because we have, to some level, waited. And I say wait, we have been waiting for information, and that information does not get to us, and now we're going to go into this really scary version of prelim notices and final notice. I'm looking at this timeline, it's just insane. This is just, but I get it. At the same time, it's unfair to not bring up the factual things that this is really messed up. I'll just say it, to put a plug in, 27, 28, 28, 29, whatever you want to call it, we can't just fix 26, 27. It's great to focus on 26, 27. We have to, as a district, stop relying on certain things. You, as departments, you cannot rely on outside contractors. As departments, you cannot rely on random funding buckets that you're just going to get so that you can spend money on things. We don't have the budget. I've said it before, this is not a blank checkbook. We have a negative balance. There's no money to be spent, no matter what department you're in. I say that because we need to start talking about cutting, and I thank you, Superintendent McCarn, for bringing this up. We need to talk about the contracts, but I'm not talking about contracts today. I'm talking about all contracts. If this district wants to fix its budget, it needs to go away from the culture of relying on contracts moving forward. This is not enough. Like, we need to actually fix this moving forward. Otherwise, we will be in the same situation by next year, because if we say we fix a budget and by next year we're back in the same system, it was like, all right, we got some money, I have to spend some money right now, that's not gonna be okay. So I support the timeline, I support what we're talking about here, but I also don't know how to tell the community that I just want the community to know we're trying our best with the limited information we get, and I don't know how else we're supposed to hold people accountable, but I'm not going to sit up here and be okay with us cutting people who get paid the least at the expense of folks who are getting paid the most, not making the decisions that they were supposed to be making for the last 6 months. So in that sense, there's a lot of folks, a lot of people, everyone needs to be prepared for the type of notices that we're going to likely be putting out. Thank you.
Member Kayada.
I want to thank President Jean a lot for bringing the scalpel to this conversation. And I have been bringing the hammer for the past couple months, and I appreciate you being able to move us to a place that we can build consensus in this conversation. I think that's part of what's been lacking is, as a board, I think we've been on our back feet so much that we don't know how to react other than just to react and say, you just need to do something. Why are you not doing anything? And I think this direction and the comments from Superintendent McCarn is a very positive step with an aggressive timeline, to be sure, and I do support that timeline as well. But this, I just wish we had been here in November. I do want to just speak to how we move forward and what I need to move forward. And I'll start just by calling out what I've been feeling for a while, which is that I feel like I've been the last to know about what we've been doing as a district. Today we had some people from the care department talking about maybe this thing is getting cut. Is it? I have no idea. No one has told me what programs are actually being affected. It's 20%. What does that mean? It was decided behind closed doors here in Cerna. The board never approved these things. Did we say to cut LDV's after-school program? No, we never said that. In fact, we said the opposite. We said if a program can be self-sustaining or can be close to self-sustaining, we should keep it. We didn't vote on that. We don't know what the impacts have been. I don't know. You know, I walk around town, I see some of our employees, and I get the side eye, and I'm like, well, apparently you've been noticed, because I don't know who's actually being affected by this and what programs they are. And I think that's what needs to change for us to be able to make these decisions. Last Thursday, we had a meeting where we basically were presented with one option. It's this option or insolvency. And I didn't feel like I had any control in that moment about what I was actually voting on. I just knew that if I didn't vote on this, we were facing insolvency. And that's not a place I want to be in, because I can't go and look to the community and say, I had to do it, that's what staff brought me. That's not what the board should be doing. And I think part of what it will take to get that is we need, on any future layoffs, to understand how much of a savings are we getting, is it general fund or restricted, and what is the program impact? Because if I see a person, whether it's a vacancy or a filled role, I'm not sure if that is a program that we no longer need, if that's a program that we're actively cutting. I'm not sure if that's just moving an employee from one school site to another. That data is not clear. And so all these actions, we're continuing down the path of basically giving the district staff the baton and saying, please fix this for us. And then when you bring it back, we basically just have to approve it. And that's not how this should be working. I do definitely agree we need to have a qualified second interim. It has to be in a qualified position, and we need to do everything we can to get it there. But I would also say the board needs to have options. We need to know and have some say in determining the future of our district. It can't just be that staff spend 2 weeks getting right to the line, and then one of the programs that's getting us to the line is one that we absolutely cannot stand to cut, and then we're just in a position where all of a sudden our insolvency plan isn't working, and all of a sudden we're not qualified because it's like the board didn't do it. We need to overcut in order to allow us to make the decisions as a policy body that allow us to bring this under control. And I will say one thing that's been sitting with me for a minute and is really worrying me is we still have not received our external audit for the 24-25 school year. And the reason that concerns me is because we don't know how deep of a hole we have to fill if we don't yet have last year's numbers, which will give us this year's starting numbers. And if there's a surprise waiting in that document, that can just really throw this whole thing off. If an auditor is this late, generally not a good sign. I also want to understand if our auditors have found other issues that we haven't discussed yet that haven't been brought to us. And we need to be able to ask this third party as a board, what is actually happening? What are you seeing? And what else should we be asking that we're not? I think that's my comments for now.
Thank you. Member Rhodes?
Okay, so I think on top of what Member Kayada said around what needs to be seen when cuts are coming back, I think for me, I would also like to see, with any of the jobs or layoffs we're talking about, the direct student-facing positions, indirect student supports, it needs to be labeled for us, administrative versus central office. How many of the proposed reductions impact services tied to IEP, English learner, foster youth, high needs students? I think that's the information that we need, and I think that our community needs as well, because when I'm in community, the questions are, the cuts that you guys are doing, and you're proposed keeping things furthest away from the classroom, well, how do these cuts actually impact services to students? And I think it's super important for us as a board and our community members to get that in these updates. And so not only what Member Kayada said, but also all of the things that I listed below are things that I need staff to bring back. And my constituents and community members need it as well. And so, me, I'm the community guy, and I'm a Southside kid. You know all the stuff. But at the end of the day, these impact our community. Our schools directly impact our entire community. A lot of the staff here, a lot of the folks that are in the audience, they all attended these schools. Sac City Unified School District. We're all here. So this is an opportunity to do it right. In a short period of time, as right as it can be done, but that's transparency. If we get that information, that's transparency. And anything else is us touting it, but not really giving it the way it deserves. So I'll leave my comments there.
Thank you. Member Ibarra?
I have two questions I don't need to answer for tonight. The first one is, in this process, it would be helpful for us to understand how you all are projecting your enrollment in this process so that we understand the formula being put forth because of questions that we get as well, right? And so that it's consistent in the messaging. I think it's not clear right now as stands, which puts us in a position where we don't have a clear answer when we are questioned about that. And so that's where that's coming from. The other thing I did ask on February 5th and was hoping we would have an update for at this meeting, but I understand there's a lot of moving parts going on, is around the positions that are currently working out of class. I think this is very important for us to have as a board because we are talking about layoffs and there are laws that we need to follow and there are also folks that are going to see what's happening and we need to be conscious of that. So when you have these interim positions, it's important for us to understand currently how many people are in these interim positions and how many of them can actually go back to their original roles, because I fear that we are going to close out the original roles and bypass the legal process for filling those interim positions. So I just want to make sure that we're understanding what we as a board are approving when we're saying we agree with this layoff list or the initial process of it, because I would hate for that to come back as something that I'm tied to in litigation because we failed to understand that piece. So that is why I asked on the 5th and I'm asking again. And I'll say the question again just to make sure that it's clear. I would like to know how many people are in interim positions and how many of them can go back to their original roles for the vacancies here in central office specifically, but I mean, overall, when we're speaking to being compliant.
I'm hopping. And then also, and if we have to make deeper cuts, just question superintendent and to our board, but also maybe the superintendent right now, to think about like what is our threshold for when educational quality is compromised. Like that's something you have to think about. That's something we have to think about. But as it comes back, we have to be cognizant of that. Thank you.
Member Benjamin.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback on that, I think I try to make things as simple as possible. Just how we can view these things. I see it as we've been asking for a position control. This is what I like to see by March 5th. Side by side, 3 columns: position control, the impact statement, right, of this position, and the fiscal impact. I think it's real. It's real easy, and it's what we've been asking for since November, and so I think in those 3 spaces we could take a look because our as a board, I speak for myself. I'm up here, and I ran, to represent my constituents, but to make informed decisions. And to this point, what we're telling you all is we've been asking for this information. And to me, it boils down to just 3 simple things, which is position control. We need to see what that is and be able to understand that. We need impact statements, how this is going to impact, right? So that we can see these 20% cuts, so we can see where this impacts our communities, the most vulnerable, and the fiscal impact of that. It's simple. And so I'd like to see that. I want to give a direction. I'd like to see that by March 5th. Thank you.
I think with that, we've heard from everybody, so I want to allow our interim superintendent, is there any questions or comments you'd like to make in response to everything you just heard? And no pressure. If not, you're allowed processing time.
I think what I will say is that if I have additional questions, and if we have additional questions as we process, that I will reach out specifically, because there may be. Obviously, in order to get to where we need to be by March 5th. And I guess just the overall statement I will make is that it would be hard to imagine a scenario that we make even more additional cuts that does not impact students. Right? So if the bar is bring cuts that don't impact students, like we've passed that already. So they're whether they're central or they're site, I hear really loud and clear the desire for options that give the board, and information on budget, information on numbers, position control, the vacancies. Remember, Ibarra, you use working out of class and interim interchangeably. They're different, but being able to explain and show, like, I can hear all that. So I guess just to say, when we bring additional cuts back for you, layoffs, for you to consider March 5th, there will be impacts to students. So just making sure that's clear. Because these are cuts in addition to what we did already, and I know you're going to hear some more tonight, and I guess that's the other thing I would say is there are 2 more agenda items that don't have the things that you're asking for because it was on there like it was last time. So the kind of net, the what's closing, the what's opening, the impact statement, those 2 things aren't on what is coming that came last week. They will be on what you are asking for tonight for moving forward on March 5th. And so I say that so staff presenting isn't going to have those. But I hear that it's an ask for those that come back on the 5th. And if there's something else, I'll just ask you later because that's all I can think of right now.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will move on to 12.